Channel 81.
This isn't something I plan to talk about. To be honest, I've done a pretty good job convincing myself it wasn't real, but it's been stuck in my head for weeks now, playing over and over like some broken video. So here it is. It was around 2 a.m., one of those nights where sleep just wasn't going to happen. So I did what I usually do when I'm restless. I turned on the TV and started flipping through channels. Nothing really caught my attention, just the usual late-night junk. Infomercials, static, reruns I've seen 100 times. Then I hit Channel 81. At first, I thought it was just another dead frequency. The screen was dark, a little grainy, but there wasn't any static. There wasn't any sound at all. Just quiet. After a few seconds, the picture started to clear. There wasn't a logo or overlay, no music, no station watermark, no cuts. It looked like a feed from a security camera. Static angle, poor resolution, nothing special. Except it was my living room. Same worn couch, same crooked lamp, same blue-gray rug with the corner curled up. Just like mine. I thought maybe I'd hit one of those smart display features, or maybe my phone was casting without me realizing it. But my phone was off. And my TV doesn't even have a camera. I got up and walked into the room. There was nothing unusual, no light, no equipment, no hidden lens in the bookshelf. I looked around, then turned to face the direction of the TV, the same way the camera seemed to be facing. On the screen, my living room appeared exactly as it should, but there was a slight delay, a second, maybe two. When I waved at the TV, the image waved back a moment later. I told myself it had to be some kind of loop or a glitch. Maybe a neighbor's feed somehow crossed over. That would have been weird, but still possible. When I sat back down on the couch, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. On the screen, I was still standing, still turned toward the hallway, still facing away from the camera. I stared at the image, trying to process why the version of me on the screen hadn't moved, hadn't followed me back, hadn't sat down like I had. I turned around just to be sure. Of course, the room was empty. I was alone. At least I thought I was. Then something changed. On the screen, behind the standing figure, behind me, a shape began to emerge from the shadows. It was slow at first, almost like it was testing how far it could step without being noticed. I leaned closer. The screen stayed perfectly silent. It looked like a person, but the limbs were wrong. The posture, too bent. The movement, deliberate and slow, like it had all the time in the world. The figure crept closer to the unmoving version of me on the screen, and I couldn't do anything but sit there and watch. I grabbed the remote and switched the TV off. Nothing happened. The screen stayed on. I unplugged the power cord. Still there. The same image, the same figure, now almost touching the back of the other me. The silence felt unbearable, like the air in the room had thickened, like the TV wasn't just showing me something, but watching me back. Then, the figure on the screen turned around, and it wasn't me. The next morning, Channel 81 was gone. Didn't show up in the menu, didn't respond to manual input. I called my provider. They told me they didn't broadcast anything on that frequency. Never had. They asked if I might have had a bad HDMI connection. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain something you barely understand yourself? It's been 3 weeks now. Most nights are normal again. Nothing weird. Nothing on the screen. But sometimes, usually around the same time, the TV turns on by itself. Volume muted. Screen black. Then, just for a moment, Channel 81 appears. And every time, the room on the screen looks exactly like mine. Except there's always someone else standing there, and I swear, they're getting closer.
The Ghost That Went to Court.
In the hills of West Virginia, over a century ago, a woman died under strange circumstances. A month later, a spirit began to speak, and what it said changed everything. This is the true story of the only murder trial in U.S. history, where testimony from a ghost helped convict the killer. On a cold January morning in 1897, Elva Zona Heister was found lying at the bottom of the stairs in her home. Her husband, Erasmus Trout Shoe, claimed she had fainted. The local doctor, a man Trout had called after already preparing her body for burial, wrote it off as heart failure. There was no autopsy, just a quick funeral, a closed case. But Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heister, didn't accept that. From the start, Mary Jane noticed things that felt wrong. Trout wouldn't let anyone near the body. At the wake, he kept wrapping Zona's neck in scarves, adjusting them, obsessing over them, even when the coffin was closed. He cried, yes, but something in the performance felt forced, calculated. Mary Jane said it best. There was something too quiet in his grief. Then, the dreams began. Night after night, always at the same time. Mary Jane would wake to a pressure in the air, like the room had changed, like the silence was watching her. At the foot of her bed stood her daughter, not floating, not flickering, standing. Her dress the same, her hands folded, but her neck tilted unnaturally, as if the head hung by thread. The first night, Zona didn't speak. She just stood there, eyes wide, jaw slightly open. The second night, she stepped closer. He's not who he says he is, she whispered. He took my breath with his hands. And on the fourth night, she told her mother everything. That Trout had attacked her after dinner, that he was angry she hadn't cooked meat, that he crushed her windpipe, twisted her neck until it snapped between the first and second vertebrae. Then she was gone, and Mary Jane was left in a cold, silent room that smelled like roses and fresh earth. Mary Jane didn't go to the sheriff with stories of ghosts. She went with details. She told them the neck was broken, that bruises would be found, that the windpipe had been crushed, that the vertebrae, specifically the first and second, had been fractured in a twist. The sheriff asked her how she knew that. She simply said, "She told me." At first, they called her emotional, said she was inventing things out of grief. But the more she repeated those details, the more people, including the local prosecutor, started to pay attention. Enough so that the body was exhumed. 3 doctors performed the autopsy, and every detail Mary had mentioned was there. Bruising around the neck, a crushed windpipe, a clean break between the first and second cervical vertebrae, just as Zona, or someone, had described. The case was reopened. Trout Shoe was arrested and put on trial for murder. At the trial, Mary Jane took the stand. The defense tried to make her look foolish, unstable. They asked her again and again how she could possibly have known those injuries. And every time, she gave the same answer: because she told me. The judge instructed the jury to ignore any mention of ghosts, to focus only on the facts. But it was too late. The testimony had done its work. The autopsy had done the rest. Trout was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. He died a few years later, alone and forgotten. Mary Jane never changed her story. She never profited from it. She never spoke on a stage or wrote a book. She just buried her daughter and told the truth, whether the world wanted to hear it or not. Today, a plaque still stands near Zona's grave. It reads, "The only known case in which testimony from a ghost helped convict a murderer." A story that started with a mother's instinct, deepened by a dream, and ended not in belief but in proof. Not all hauntings are meant to scare us. Some come to speak, to correct what was hidden, to point a trembling finger at the living and whisper, "Tell them what happened to me." And when they do, someone needs to listen.